Today we have Judy Condo, the Director of Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center in Albany County, here with us. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Janice.
Good. Today I want to ask you some questions about what is the rape crisis?
Well, there's an immediate crisis, and then there tends to be a long-term crisis. So in the immediate end of it, rape is a legal definition. That's the first thing to remember.
Okay.
It's a crime. It is non-consensual sexual activity. And most specifically, when we're talking about rape, we're talking about intercourse that was against the person's will. So the first piece of it is a psychological trauma. You have engaged in an intimate act that was against your will. You did not agree to it. So it opens doors to, it was a crime. What do you want to do about a legal situation? Do you want to involve the police, law enforcement? Many people might say no. Whether or not you make that choice, we're going to encourage you as a rape crisis staff to go to a hospital for the collection of forensic evidence. That creates an opportunity for you to bide time in making that choice. A hospital would have to hold the evidence for 30 days. That gives you 30 days to decide whether or not you want to involve the police.
Oh, really?
You have medical, physical difficulties.
Okay.
They may need treatment. You may not, because they're internal, you may not be aware that there is a physical injury that should be medically treated. And it's best to do it all at the same time. There may be, it's a sex crime, it's a sex act, so there may be sexually transmitted diseases. They need to be treated. They needed to be assessed at a baseline. You may have also contracted HIV, the infection. That can be treated prophylactically initially. You could have, and though it can't be cured instantly, you can lower that. So you've got medical, legal, and physical problems all being thrown at you when you're in a state of trauma. The long term is that if untreated, or if you are not able to manage the symptoms that may manifest later on by yourself without support or whatever, these things are going to keep happening. There is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. That initial impact of that stress or that trauma is going to manifest over time. It just doesn't go away by itself. So you need to do something about it, and that's why it's such a difficult crime to deal with. It has so many components.
One of the things I was thinking too, they say some statistics say 1 in 4 rapes are reported. And I always wonder, to whom are they reported? Do they mean to the police, to the family, to the hospital? I mean, what is that statistic?
Well, it's probably even less than that, and it's usually referring to the police.
Okay.
Because
it always just says reported, and it's like, what do they mean by that, reported? I mean, the statistics gathered, that's a very general statement, reported. So.
Yes, and actually, I should probably qualify. If you use the 1 in 4 notion, it's a combination. Police will say maybe only 1 or 2 in 10 would actually be reported to police sources.
So 1 in 4 could be reported to anyone.
Yes, because there are other, like as a rape crisis center, we are reporting statistics of the number of clients we have. There's a pretty good break-off between those who will report to a police agency and those who will report to us that it happened. So places like the New York State Department of Health are collecting those types of statistics. Criminal justice statistics in this state are collected by the Division of Criminal Justice Services. So they're getting, rape is one of the things they call an index crime.
Oh,
so,
what's that mean, index crime?
When the state is tracking, I'll say how dangerous an area you might be living in, every police jurisdiction is going to target how many murders there were, how many rapes there were, how many burglaries there were.
Okay.
And then they just sort of evaluate on that basis. And all those things have to be monthly and then annually reported to the state, and then reported across the state as to county and smaller jurisdictions. So.
What are some of the developments in rape crisis that have changed through the years?
Well, a lot of things, and many of them are probably a direct result of citizens like you and me going back to the early days of the anti-rape movement, which is right after the women's movement, people saying, we're not doing right by victims of rape and sexual assault. So they need services, they need laws that better reflect the nature of the crime so that we put the burden on the offender. We recognize that this is a recidivist crime. So basically, there have been all sorts of changes that have moved to that direction. Most significant was the Sexual Assault Reform Act, which went through in the year 2000. That's when it was passed, and it was massive change in identifying, defining rape and sexual assault, and it was just cleaned up in 2003. But it did a variety of things. The hospital treatment, it changed the laws for the Crime Victims Board that a victim can go to the hospital, not file a police report, and still file a claim with the Crime Victims Board.
Oh, that's good. To get maybe compensated for the forensics evidence being collected.
As well as opening the door to future treatment.
Okay.
So that they could come to an agency or they could come to a private provider and get the treatment. So that would be, there's a need for the immediacy, that the person is, at least falls within the immediate time that they could get the forensic exam. It's the forensic exam that launches the ability to file the compensation claim. So that was a biggie.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
A couple of laws were created, and that's been what the changes over time have been, to again define the behaviors. We have drug-facilitated rapes. We have drugs that were added to the public health definitions. GHB was added to the definition. It didn't exist before. So
so that's brand new that it's in the law now.
Yes, forcible touching. Maybe you recall the episode that happened several years ago in Central Park, where after the Puerto Rican Day Parade, there was this wilding where women were grabbed in the park.
Yes.
There was a lot of sexual touching for degrading purposes. That was new law as of 2000. All of it took effect in February of 2001. None of that existed before. There were just a variety of changes of definitions, too, that just made it clear, added things like the types of coercive abuse that can take place. Adding health providers, mental health providers as sexual assailants when indeed they abused the treatment setting. It might have been unethical before, now it's criminal.
Okay.
Women had difficulty being able to pursue prosecution when they were involved in an acquaintance rape type dating situation. It was very often the law previously had pretty much limited them to being able to say what kind of force was used, what sort of coercion, and automatically an offender would say, well, you know, she agreed to it. So having something that if the person said no, and said no in a way that anyone ought to reasonably be able to understand that it's no, that was that notion was put into the law and created an e-felony. So that can be prosecuted much better now, because a lot of victims of acquaintance rape couldn't do a thing about it. There just wasn't sufficient evidence other than, you know, her word against his word, and there you were.
Well, what's a victim, what can a victim do for treatment or for help to help them find their way on that route to being a survivor?
Well, they need to take the most courageous step, which is to ask for help. I mean, that's like so many things in terms of treatment. One has to be able to say there's a problem. So something has got to be going on in your life that you're saying, this is interfering with what I would have done ordinarily.
Because I think one of the things, that's a very first challenge, is huge.
That's
I mean,
right.
as someone else could look at it and say, well, what, you don't know you were raped? But honestly, people don't. They don't always know that they were raped. They picture rape as stranger, dark alley, a gun or a knife, not always looking at, or if it's a family member or a boyfriend or something, the perception of it, they're confused or don't really have the legal definition of it. I think the first challenge really is like recognizing something isn't quite right. I may not understand what it is, may not be able to pinpoint that it was from a sexual assault, but to seek treatment.
Absolutely. And some of these benefits that are available and the free services that are associated with many of the rape crisis centers, regardless of what they're called, it's a good thing to go in and begin asking the questions. So I would encourage people to take that first step. You know, they have to get some help from people around them too, and that's one of the things that's often difficult. It takes a really good friend to say to you, you know, Janice, you're just acting a little strange, and I don't understand, you know, like why you're doing this. You know, maybe you should go seek some help. And it pays to go talk to somebody, even using some hotlines to help work your way through. You don't always have to identify yourself. You can just say, I have some questions. These are the things that are happening to me. I keep having repeated nightmares. I've never had an intimate partner. I just can't. You know, and there are certain things that ought to be normal lifestyle things. There are pieces of my day that just seem to disappear. You know, so many of these things could be symptoms of a trauma that has happened to you a long time ago. The naming of it, you already pointed out, you know, the majority of people are assaulted by someone they know. So not only do they not know that it's a rape or a sexual assault, they don't want to know that it's a rape or sexual assault. It's denial. And so it takes some doing to sit down and put those words together that says, this happened to me, this is the result of what's happening to me, I want to change it, I'm willing to work on it, and I know it wasn't my fault. Somebody else did this to me.
Well, what are some of the variations in treatment that a rape crisis center or maybe another counseling center might be able to offer?
Well, there are some technical differences, different specific treatments that have come along over time that you might find somebody who specializes in them. There's a special rapid eye movement desensitization treatment that involves some specific theories that a number of the rape crisis centers who have therapists on staff have begun doing some practicing of this. So you can find it in different parts of the state. And it involves tapping, it involves waving, and it's a theory that basically says that your cognitive process doesn't apply to traumatic memory, so that there are other kinds of techniques that can assist you for really unknown reasons, and that's the tapping and the waving of the hand in a very rhythmic way that is dealing with your eye movement. That somehow processes the trauma and moves it into a part of your brain that you can cope with. So some of them are doing that. Long-term talk treatment works.
It does, long-term talk.
Short-term talk, a lot of behavioral type treatments that or at least cognitive redesigning of your thoughts. A lot of victims, and I think this is the biggest chunk of it, a lot of victims believed what they were told by some trusted individual. So they think that they caused the rape. That has a lot to do with the
You
silence.
hear that a lot, though. People
Absolutely.
always blaming the victim or the family of the victim or something.
And it gets reinforced.
Never
you
the
know,
offender.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it gets
okay.
reinforced. And those same people in your environment also can kind of sort of drive you underground as a victim, because they're saying, even if you came forward and at some point said, this did happen to me, the next round is, well, that happened so long ago. Like, why can't you get over it, you know? This should be out of your head. And there are things about the nature of trauma, particularly the behavioral responses. There are physiological responses to trauma that there's not much you can do about it. There are, a lot of work has been done with police under stress conditions, and you learn from that some of the physiological things that you just wouldn't understand. It doesn't seem to be normal. And they have to do with the kinds of triggers. Whatever you focused on at the time of an attack, say it was a violent attack, you are pre-programmed to survive. So in that process of survival, a lot of visual focusing will take place. The analogy with a police officer is a gun is held to your face, and you ask somebody to describe, what the person holding the gun looked like. They can't do it.
Yeah.
The focus is on how do you survive. You need to know where the danger spot is. You do that with another person too. So the elements that were around you, and you're in a highly sensitized state, things that are associated with the things around you, maybe a flapping drape or something. Well, over time, the next time some drape flaps, you're right back into the crisis situation that you were when you started. And things like dark corridors or whatever, anything directly related to that, you begin to develop additional associations. So say an elevator opened, at the end of all this. Now an elevator is associated with this feeling that you got the traumatic situation. Now you have an elevator phobia to go with your corridor phobia, and it just, it goes on and on and on. And if somebody doesn't stop the process or sit down with you and analyze what it was that actually happened or what's happening to you, so that's a different kind of modality or a way to approach the diagnosis and assessment. And different people, different types of clinicians have different particular skills. And then it also goes with, well, what are your needs? How do you diagnose your difficulty? Many therapists set up contracts. You have goals, the therapist has goals, you arrange it in the beginning to figure out how long you're going to be together and what goals are accomplishable. If you want to totally change your personality in the next 3 months, I'm going to say you can't do it.
Does everyone need long-term treatment, or can some people process the trauma in short-term treatment? Or
one of the most interesting things that I think we've learned over time about sexual assault treatment is that it does tend to be focused on the things to get you through life right now. So what you end up with, which is different, is repetitive sequences over time, as opposed to, I'm going to see you for the next 2 years and you're just going to come continuously weekly. Maybe I'm going to see you for 4 months and we're going to work on this problem. You go out into real life, you work on that, you see how you process, and then if something comes up or you move to a next stage and you have greater insight in something else, come on back, we'll do it again, we'll refocus on something else. So it can take a very long time, but what you're looking at is distinct, brief times to do this. Some people, depending on the nature of the trauma, you can think about when we're talking about child sexual abuse, adult survivors of child sexual abuse. Well, if some child were totally isolated from the rest of the world and underwent this kind of trauma for years and years and years, that's long term. I'm not going to be able to do a lot to do much more than show you how to get through the day, or you know,
Giving that client the tools to learn how to manage their life so they can manage it in a more healthy way.
Absolutely. So that's why the modalities are so different. And a point that I'd really like to make, we know the incidence of sexual assault is so high. I think the statistic is 1 in 8 girls under 18 will have had some manner of sexual contact. A lot of people don't get treatment. And yet, I think it's important to know that also you got a 50-50 split between boys and girls being sexually abused as children. All of the sexually abused boys do not grow up to be rapists and child molesters. The same thing is true in treatment when you're looking at somebody who's been sexually abused. A whole lot of them make it on their own. You know, we would like to think that they would perhaps do better or fine-tune something that they learned all by themselves in coping, so that treatment becomes something that is life-enhancing, that there are like grades of survivorship, as opposed to saying if you don't get treatment, you're just never going to hack the program.
But what about the people that they're functioning on their own? They may have a great career, they may, look very successful, whatever that definition is on the outside, and you look at them next to the person who had to get disability, is on a lot of meds, and isn't able to go to work, isn't able to go anywhere alone. Can you really say that they're at opposite ends, though, of the healing process? I mean, in terms of the person who may have the career, may look very together and high functioning, may actually be feeling the same things as the other person who's showing it more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People respond to this in different ways. There shouldn't be a kind of pecking order that, you're a better survivor than you are. What we say to everybody, particularly right after the assault, the important thing is you live through it. Some people die.
That's true.
So it's important to recognize that that's really it. Whatever you did, whatever you had to do, whatever path you took, and everybody does not have equal opportunity to coping with anything. Money can be an important factor. Where you live, if you live. People who start out being more vulnerable to crime are the ones who attract, offenders, because if we think of it as a crime, we think of people who, they're not crazy committing it, they're doing it because they want to, they're driven to it in some particular way, and they don't want to go to jail. So they're very creative in doing things to you and selecting, they're predators. They are selecting an individual that they think that is going to facilitate their getting away with a crime.
Okay.
So if I'm going to pick on somebody who doesn't have the resources to cope through life in the first place, they're not starting at the same place as someone who may be carrying a lot of internal strife and maybe acting out in other kinds of ways that are very destructive, but who seems okay on the outside. We just have different starting places.
What's some words of inspiration for someone who's been victimized, to have them, help them, lead them into a healing place?
You didn't cause it, I think is probably the most important. Somebody else did this to you. Help is available. The hard part is to ask for it, and you just need to try to summon the courage to ask for it. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can sort of just move along into the process. Ask a question here and there. Just pick up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it starts. Just pick up the phone.
What is the hotline number for Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center?
This is the
I'll
sexual
put it on you because I can't remember the
hotline.
hotline number.
518-447-7716, and that's a 24-hour number. So anyone who has questions, whatever, but that's also your access to the emergency services too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. Any other ideas or thoughts on survivorship?
Well, I think
Possible. That's a big one.
absolutely. And whatever process you do, you get out of it what you put into it. So that's the courageous
That's a big
part of it.
key. Yeah. Okay.
You got to want to, and there's no quick fix. Right along with a lot of people do just fine without traditional mental health services.
Okay.
You know, so there are other places that you can go to. I mean, whatever it is that's important to you. Some people turn to religion, whatever their faith might be. They also may do things that make them feel better as a person. Perhaps they speak, they go out someplace, they assist, they find populations who may have been abused or whatever, and they go do services. Maybe they even work in a soup kitchen someplace because that makes them feel like they're contributing somehow.
Service to others.
And they can volunteer for all of those hotlines across New York State. And indeed, some people do that.
That's true. I should ask you, as we're closing here, the needs of rape crisis centers. I think you take donations, right? Volunteers.
Yes.
So give them a call all across the state and see what ways that you'd be able to help out your rape crisis center.
And we would be extremely grateful
Okay.
for whatever you can do. But volunteering is really, really key. All of these services are on a 24-hour basis. If somebody had to pay around-the-clock staff, they just couldn't do it. So that is how we cope.
Okay, give her a call, 518-447-7100. And thank you for joining us.